Shabbat Shalom to you all. The dreidel, Nes Gadol Haya Po. If you are in Israel, a great miracle happened here. Nes Gadol Haya Sham. For those of us in the diaspora, a great miracle happened there. So what is the miracle? Well, the Baba Maisa is that the miracle is about the Hanukkah, but that really is a Nes Gadol. That really is a great miracle. Because on January 25th, 1985, when Temple Shalom was firebombed, the bomb came in through the window right beside the Hanukkah. Everything else was destroyed on that floor but the Hanukkah. No explanation really would make sense that the Hanukkah remained untouched while the flames burned around it. The miracle is one of survival. And it really is a miracle, not only a story that took place around 165 BCE, over 2,100 years ago, but the miracles that continue throughout that period of time and up until this day. I, like many Jews and friends of ours, were tremendously dismayed by the cowardice, by the lack of empathy, and by the utter stupidity of the President of the United States yesterday. As the murderers gathered in that unholy sanctuary called the United Nations, a place of a den of thieves, yet another motion against the state of Israel, as if thinking that somehow settlements would be the cure-all of all that is wrong in the Middle East. And the ego and the emotion of Obama took hold as he instructed his ambassador to the United Nations to keep her hand down when voting no, but to raise it for an abstention. When I think of abstentions, I think of that great moral country, Switzerland. That's what I think of when I think of abstentions. You can be neutral in World War II. We saw how that turned out. As they continue to hold billions of dollars from victims of the Shoah and refuse to release them. That's the neutrality and the morality of a Switzerland. Will anything come of this with regard to the vote that passed yesterday? I believe absolutely not. And while he certainly is not a fan of mine, I have to like the tweet that came, things will be different come January 20th. And they will be. Things will be different. Not all good, but they will be different. I don't understand something, and I am far from any seat of power. What was in your head, Obama? If you heard, did you hear last night? Did you hear the sound of millions of Jews ripping up their membership in the Democratic Party. Did you hear that? I did. As I spoke to my 89-year-old mother-in-law, lifelong Democrat, member of AIPAC, who cried. She cried when Trump got elected, but this was an even more bitter cry yesterday because her own president forsake her. We will survive. I don't understand what the end game was on the part of Obama, because there has been no group that has been more loyal to the Democratic Party than the Jewish community of the United States. Over 85% of the Jews of the United States have consistently voted Democrat. That will not happen in the next election. There will be a long memory. So why do this? It was your parting shot at Bibi. Really? For what reason? But then, I think there's an upside. And the upside, of course, is related to the Torah portion. You see, Obama gave us a midrash. He gave us a story to understand. And I go back to the Torah portion. And I remember year after year after year, I would talk about this Torah portion, and I would scratch my head and said, Yaakov, Jacob, what's with you? Labriut, what's with you? You have a favorite son. You give him a ketonet pasim, a coat of many colors, so he stands out more. And then you send him off to the brothers to find out how they're doing after he's reported his dreams, which places himself at front and center. Jacob, what were you doing? What kind of parenting is this? I've come to a conclusion. It's the type of parenting that too many of us do not do. When our children are born, we take them to doctors to receive vaccinations, unless we're morons. And we give the children what? We give the children the virus that they hope they won't ultimately contract. That's what the inoculation is. It is part of the virus that goes into the body so that the nervous system and the blood cells can create the antidote. So if, chas v'shalom, the child is attacked with this virus, we have something inside to be able to fight it. We, I believe, for too long, have been raising our children in a bubble and have been so protective of them that they shouldn't be affected by any adversity whatsoever. Chas v'shalom, your child is not chosen first. Your child doesn't get into this preschool. I'm surprised there aren't schools for the fetus in utero. Maybe there are. Maybe there are. It's a good idea. Maybe I'll think about doing this after Shabbos. It's a good entrepreneurial thing, you think? Yeah? Okay. And we'll see how many people line up to have this preschool. If our child, God forbid, does not get into the what do I do when I'm 2, That child's life is destroyed forever. They're marked forever of Vayeshev. We have been too protective. I see this at the university. I see this when these 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds come up against things in the university, bam! And they're not prepared. And they don't know how to deal with it. I'm talking about when they come up against criticism of Israel, some of it true, some of it not true. Most stick their head in the sand and they hide. Some go over to the dark side. Less than 5% of the students, the Jewish students in North America, will get into the fight with us at Hillel when we're fighting against BDS, the boycott, divestment, and sanction. That's a number across North America. No more than 5% of the students will get into the fight with us. Because we have sent our children off without inoculating them. We have not exposed them in their younger years to some adversity. So they have no sense of how strong they are. They only know that this is something new in their world, and they just don't know how to deal with it. And that's why Jacob was so brilliant. He knew that there was something in this kid called Yosef. He knew that there was the prospect of leadership, and he was going to make sure that Yosef knew his own strength as well. And so he put a mark on him in the form of a shmata, in the form of some clothing, a rag. And he sent him out into the brothers to see what would happen. Jacob was no fool. What did he think was going to happen? Was he surprised when there was some message that came back and said, your son has died? No. Did he believe that the child had died as a result of the lie that was told about torn by an animal? I doubt it. He probably thought that his other sons killed him. And he mourned deeply. I see this opportunity as to what happened yesterday for people to regroup. Okay, we got a smack in the mouth yesterday, or a kick in the gut. The reality is that the Jews of North America, compared to the Jews around the rest of the world, have been living in la-la land, having phenomenal support from governments over many, many years. And by the way, this is not the first time that the United States has allowed a disgusting resolution against Israel to pass. It's not. There's a list yesterday I saw of a number of things that have happened. Interestingly enough, mostly under Republican presidents. Mostly. This, I think, was one of the first times that a Democrat has done this. We're going to see what Chuck Schumer is going to do with this, because he's left with trying to put the pieces together. Feinstein, I don't think, will be considered serious. She's making excuses for Obama. Chuck Schumer is not. If Schumer's smart, he'll send his niece in to make it better. Yes. Chuck Schumer is the senior senator from New York, and in fact, the what do you call it? The head of the minority. Is his niece? I'm sorry. No, his niece is the comedian. Yes, Schumer was in fact disgusted, and I'm really pleased to tell you that the rabbinic organization that Rabbi Brown, Rabbi Moskowitz, and myself belonged to immediately came out with a statement of absolute disgust. And I can guarantee you that over 90% of the Reform rabbis in the United States voted for Hillary. But it's okay. It's okay to get a little bloody nose. It's okay to get kicked in the gut, because it really then tells us what we're made of. I mean, what are we celebrating starting tonight? We're celebrating a story of a bunch of guys from a little town called Modi'in, that today is not such a little town anymore. It is the main town between Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim. And I was on a trip to Israel with Sarah, which shouldn't be a surprise, because 90% of the trips that I've ever taken to Israel, Sarah has been there. And we went and we planted trees in Modi'in as it was just being rebuilt from the ancient town to the modern bedroom community that it is today, because the people who live in Modi'in today either work in Yerushalayim or Tel Aviv. Okay? You know who created Modi'in, who the architect was? Moshe Safdie. Have any of you ever been to Modi'in? Yes? Of course. Okay. Kathy? Huh? Getting into Modi'in is okay. Getting out of Modi'in, it's meshuggah. You're going around in circles. My oldest daughter lived there for a couple of weeks. I said, what do you do? She says, I don't do anything. When I leave home, I can't even find my way back. Everything looks the same. It is one of the, he decided, Moshe, that he wanted a certain circularity. My God, the cab drivers can't figure out where to pick you up. Anyway, but we're going back 2,100 years to this little nothing town outside of Yerushalayim. Of course, Tel Aviv didn't exist. And the story of this guy, Yehuda, and his brothers. And they said, we're going to stand up, we're going to fight. It made no sense. What are the Jews coming with? Some bows and arrows and sticks and shtick. And what are we fighting against? Elephants, horses, weaponry of the Syrian Greeks. But they said, we have no alternative. But the real story of Hanukkah, and it's fascinating, is the story not about the Jews fighting the Syrian Greeks. It's the civil war that went on. It's the Jews fighting the Jews. That's the real story. Because most of the Jews in Judea at the time were very happy to assimilate into the Syrian Greek culture. It was a civil war. And I suspect we're going to see a similar civil war now in the United States with the Jews, for those on the far left and those on the far right, and those in the middle who are going to be torn. And that's okay, because this is a conversation that has been long overdue and one that needs to happen. And in the meantime, we also have to have this very important and what will be very, very emotional and at times angry conversation between diaspora Jewry and Israeli Jewry of what that society is going to look like. And whether or not we're going to allow right-wing Haredim lunatics to determine the future for the spiritual health of that country. So we're in for a bit of a ride, and the question is, are we up for it? Or are we going to stick our heads in the sand? And I hope we won't stick our heads in the sand. And I hope we will do something somewhat akin to Jacob. We will provide opportunities for our kids to get their hands dirty and their noses bloodied. Yes, their hands dirty and their noses bloodied. Because I don't know of any other way of being able to help somebody gain a sense of strength and possibly some courage. It's not going to come by keeping them in a bubble. It's not going to come by coddling them to the extent that they're just not aware of what's out there or know how to do it. This comes at a fascinating period of time. And so this holiday, which begins tonight, and by the way, to me, it's not a coincidence that Hanukkah begins on the 25th day of the Hebrew month of Kislev in the year 165 BCE. And this little festival of lights with a tree and a credit card begins on the 25th of December. You know, Jesus wasn't born in the winter. And there are many, many Christian scholars that will tell you that. He was born in the spring. You got the shepherds out watching their sheep. The sheep aren't out in the winter. So why did they move his birthday? Because he died in the spring. You can't have, he's alive, he's dead, you know, in the same season. I mean, he's alive, he's dead, he's alive again is what they did, but he's born, he's dead. No, okay? That gives no opportunity for retail. None whatsoever. Okay? Which is another reason why there's such a Jewish connection with the moving of the date of his birth into the winter. And when they decided to move it, what date were they going to choose? Now, yes, they were involved in Greek mythology as well and other pagan symbols, but the 25th, Taka, the 25th, why that day? Because they wanted it to usurp an already existing festival on the 25th of the Hebrew month of Kislev. Now, most years, of course, we don't have what happens this year, because there are 365 and a quarter days in the Gregorian calendar, and there are 354 days in the Hebrew calendar, and we don't coincide, and we have upwards of sometimes 5-week disparity, as we're seeing this week. I mean, my goodness, Rosh Hashanah beginning in October, as it did, okay? And we see this here, that we're going into the 25th of December as the first first day of Hanukkah in the Gregorian calendar, when in fact we know that Hanukkah many times takes place in early November, mid-November, and whatever it is into December. But there is something that is very important that we do celebrate together. Whatever it is you're celebrating. And I say whatever it is you're celebrating, because yesterday I was having conversation with a very dear Sikh friend of mine, and then I had a conversation with a shopkeeper that I knew was from Iran, and I said, are you Christian or Muslim? He says, I'm Muslim. I said, you're what? You're Muslim. I said, you're telling me that's a really, really small M for Muslim. He said, that's what I am. Most Sikhs, by the way, and I didn't know this, have Christmas trees. Did you know that? I didn't know that. Most Sikhs have Christmas trees. And by the way, Sikhism is monotheistic. They have nothing to do with Jesus whatsoever. And Muslims, what are Muslims doing celebrating Christmas? They both have come into this country in the last 40 or 50 years, some, of course, before, but most Sikhs and Muslims have come into this country in the numbers that we have in the last 40 or 50 years, whereas the Jews have been here over 100 years or so. And they came in and they take a look at what the culture is, and they decided that Christmas has nothing to do with Jesus, has nothing to do with Christ, but it is a national holiday in Canada. And they say, why not? Okay? Which will come back, something that we're going to have to deal with as well. But in the midst of all of this, there is the light. Whether it's the light of the Hanukkah, whether it's the light of a Christmas tree, whether it's the light of a home or candles. We are on the shortest Shabbat of the year because we are full-blown into winter. in the northern hemisphere. And we're going to be descending into a sense of physical darkness. We must make sure that we do not descend into an emotional and spiritual darkness. But keeping the light on is not always an easy or pleasant task. May we have the strength to keep the oil burning.